with the National Association for the Gifted for Bilingual Education, excuse me. I am so excited today to introduce to you our guest speakers. We are so happy to have Robin Green, Dr. Robin Green, who is the Executive Director of the Stargate School, which is a public charter school for gifted learners in K-12 in Colorado. She is a national and international speaker on culturally inclusive best practices for gifted and twice exceptional learners. And she has just won an amazing award for her work. She has received the Jacqueline Medina Vision Leadership Award, which is given to a leader who has demonstrated innovation and strong vision for gifted education over the course of her career throughout the state of Colorado. So we are so excited to have her with us, as well as Dr. Michelle Pacheco Dubois. Dr. Dubois is the Gifted Education Coordinator for the Boulder Valley School District. She is a national and international speaker on culturally inclusive practices for multilingual learners, as well as topics related to twice exceptional learners and gifted learners with autism. Our speakers today have co-authored 2 books focusing on underserved populations in gifted education. One is Supporting the Gifted ELLs in the Latinx Community, Practical Strategies, K through 12. And the second is Leading Culturally Responsive Gifted Programs, a Roadmap for Change. So please help me welcome these 2 amazing individuals who are so willing and kind to share their expertise with us today. So thank you, Robin and Michelle. I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here with us today, whether you are on the East Coast or the West Coast or somewhere in between, like Michelle and I were in Colorado. And we're just grateful to be here with you. Michelle, I'll toss it to you to get us started.
All right, thank you. Hello, everyone. We're so excited to be here today with you to talk about creating culturally inclusive classrooms for gifted multilingual learners. So today we're going to be focusing on such topics and refining our understandings of the elements needed in order to create these types of classrooms.
And we want to thank Marcy, as well as Araceli and the entire NABE crew for inviting us and hosting this webinar today.
And our hope today is that you're going to walk away with some key learnings and some tools you're going to be implementing within your classroom.
And I know that Marcy has already introduced us, so we won't spend time on that. Thank you, Marcy, for that lovely introduction. And these were the 2 books that Marcy mentioned earlier, and we're very grateful. We have the opportunity to do a 2nd edition coming up soon of the Supporting Gifted ELLs in the Latinx Community, which we're going to change to multilingual learners. And then we have an upcoming chapter on our Latinx learners, so in a different book. So we're really excited to share those with you when those come. So like Michelle said, these will be the topics that we're focusing on today. We want to talk about those elements around a gifted, culturally inclusive classroom and really how do we build belonging? Most importantly, we want you to be able to walk away with some very tangible ideas and tools. And I know, Michelle, I just stole that one from you, so I'm sorry. All right, so we are going to be sharing with you a culturally responsive gifted framework that we use to help guide our work. That's guided our work both in Boulder, Denver when I was there, and now as well as at the state and now at Stargate. Today, we're going to focus on services, those instructional practices, what gifted services look like, the professional learning components, which is actually what you're doing here right now with us, and a key part of creating that culturally inclusive environment is family engagement. And so Michelle's got some incredible things that she's done in Boulder that she's going to share a little bit about too, that you can pick up and take with you as well. So I want to start with some definitions. And as we dive into this work today, we want to ground ourselves in some of those common terms that will guide the work that we do. While we understand these words, it really is important that we make meaning together as we work with our gifted multilingual learners. So all of these terms are critical to know, and you probably already know them. So this will be just a nice reminder for you. So one of the very first ones is that belonging, right? It's this idea, and not just the idea, the tangible reality of being seen, understood, and valued without needing to change yourself. How do we create that environment? We're going to talk about culture today. And when we talk about culture, I'm talking about in its simplest, most organic form, the meanings and the beliefs and the value system acquired by a group of people. And notice in that particular definition, we don't see skin color, we don't see language, and we don't see SES, although all of these pieces are critical to one's culture as well, or zip code. And I bring up zip code because I'm not sure how many of you on with us today have worked with our rural communities, but whether we're in a rural, urban, or suburban zip code, the challenges that we're facing are the same. The scale is different. The biggest piece for us to really think about is how we move beyond with our services, beyond heroes and holidays. So I don't know how many of you are familiar with this graphic by Zaretta Hammond and in this culturally responsive teaching in the brain. And you probably have seen the iceberg before, and many of you may have seen this. The reason that Michelle and I like this graphic is because it really does talk about culture as being this organic piece and how, as even if you think about a tree and nature, we're all connected to one another. And the way in which she has created this is that at the roots, the true roots of our culture are the things that we can't see. And that's that collective unconscious. These are our decision making. It's our concept of self. It's how we think the world began. It's those pieces. It's our religion. If you move up the tree, these are things that you might not be able to see, but they might poke up to the surface sometimes. And that's really things like our concepts of time, personal space, eye contact, things like that. And then, of course, there's the surface culture, which does show us where we can see skin color, right? Where we do notice language and things such as the games that we play, the holidays we celebrate. So when Michelle and I think about culture, we think of it more like this tree than the iceberg because it allows us to ensure that we're connected to those other trees, the other humans around us. One of the terms that's going to be really critical, and you are already doing this, the fact that you're even in this session, I know that you are cultural brokers. It's really how do we facilitate communication and understanding between the multiple groups of learners that we serve. Could be a staff member, it could be like a family liaison, it could be a paraprofessional, it could be somebody in the community, but anchoring yourself to one of those people, if it's not you, is critical as we're creating this inclusive space and classroom that is culturally responsive. Speaking of culturally responsive, so when I talk about culturally responsive education, Michelle and I like to use Geneva Gay's definition. And I'm not going to read this to you, but I'm going to highlight a couple of things. So when we talk about programming, we are focused on building self-efficacy and developing pride in culture. So students need to be able to see themselves and hear themselves in the curriculum. That is as important, if not more important, that's my own belief, than what we have now too, which is a lot of windows. We have many windows, especially in our Latinx community, into other cultures, not as many into the Latinx culture, which is a wide monolith, by the way. So we'll talk a little bit about that as well. And the way you would see this in the classroom or in a school is you would see obvious positive representation of students' families, their faces, their voices, and their languages. And this is just a model that I used. I've adapted those multi-gifted competencies that were done back in 2001 from Ford and Trotman that you may or may not be familiar with. If you're not, they're actually the basis of what I used to research to see if I could see teachers acting in this way to create an environment for a culturally inclusive environment for our multilingual learners. And then it's the culturally responsive pedagogy. And then together they create those pedagogical practices for gifted learners. Oh, Michelle, you're on mute, hon.
Oh, thank you. I did that because I had some sounds going on behind me. So let's move into classroom environment and instructional practices, which is actually the core of our presentation today. So this is some questions that Rob and I ask ourselves when we're looking at initiating a culture responsive type of classroom and environment. And I'm not going to read through these, but I am going to shout out a couple of these. As you're looking at services, how is your heritage language intentionally valued and incorporated in your classroom? Is it accepted and appreciated and valued, or is it where a classroom where we're not allowing students to speak in their native language? Hopefully it's not the second one, which I think all of you know who are listening today, that we're always looking for that first one, the model where our families and students have their heritage language embraced in the classroom and not embraced. So hopefully we have the first one. The other thing too, like are students provided with authentic learning experiences that reflect their native culture, right? We do know from research that authentic experiences for our gifted students really help them with creative and critical thinking. And so are we doing that reflects into our students' native culture? And then also, our students being allowed to participate in advanced programming options, our multilingual learners. Are they being held back because of language? Are they being offered opportunities to enhance their critical thinking by participating in these advanced programming options? So just some of the questions that we should be asking when we are looking at how we're providing services and environments for our inclusive classrooms. So as we look at this, we are looking at the questions, and we're also talking about understanding the key terms that Robin mentioned earlier, and combined with these three pillars, which you're going to say, which create the foundation for creating inclusive classroom environments. The first one is Ladson-Billings, and that is talking about culturally relevant pedagogy. That is important to have these components when you're discussing these types of culturally inclusive classrooms. High expectations for all. So we're looking for authentic, engaging types of strategies. And also we're looking at, that's so small, Robin, so I have a hard time reading that. We're looking at outcome-based teaching, and then authentic assessment techniques like demonstrations of learning and responsive to all cultural learning styles. Culture inclusive classrooms also have elements of culture responsive teaching, such as understanding diverse cultures, embracing students' native languages in the classroom, which we just talked about, active family involvement, and a community culture in the classroom. And then also looking at Green's model for the culturally inclusive classrooms, utilizing culturally responsive gifted pedagogical practices, intertwining with culturally responsive pedagogy with multicultural gifted practices as well. So when we as educators were able to understand these students' prior experiences, the values and belief systems that operate within their environment, and the manifestations and representations of culture as it pertains to students accessing learning, we can make learning relevant, authentic, and sustainable in our classrooms.
So when we think about the culturally responsive educational experiences, what we're asking you to do, what we intend to do and do, is create intentional experiences that are culturally inclusive and culturally responsive. And so this really comes down when we're looking at, even from designing the classroom space to a lesson plan, is what we believe that the students can do. And I know a lot of you work with other teachers who are supporting multilingual learners. So it's what do they also believe that students can do? And we have those high expectations because of the culture and the language and the economic diversity that our multilingual learners bring to us, not in spite of it, but because of it. And this is an incredible framework, in my not so humble opinion, by Dr. Adeyemi Stembridge. If you are not familiar with his work, he talks about he talks about designing those experiences from lesson planning at the get-go. And Michelle and I have resources for you that we'll share with you, so you'll be able to access some of this as well, including the resources that we've used today and access to some of these different links here. So really, when thinking about lesson planning, right, from the very beginning, it's how do we think about cultural identity, relationships, make sure that we're strength-based, how are we ensuring that we're protecting our students, to think about some of those protective factors, and we think about their vulnerability to our lesson. It's about the engagement and the rigor. And you'll see in these pieces that the key thing in them is that we have to know our students. And one of the things Michelle and I haven't talked about, that we go into in other trainings, is we do deep dives into, when we think about professional learning, our own cultures and what our culture is bringing, maybe masking, maybe hindering other students' access to highly impactful gifted education. And what I love about this is that it does start to get at some of those deep pieces within our own culture to make us think outside of ourselves. So when we think about these experiences, these are just some of the best practices, and I'm sure you've seen these before. So really, with our multilingual learners and other gifted learners, it's about project-based learning and problem-based learning. I worked with a teacher in Denver one year who worked in a 99% Title I school. So Title I school, mostly Spanish-speaking multilingual learners. There were some students from South Sudan as well, who were not speaking English as their heritage language. The gifted and talented teacher that was there, she did a pullout, and she was working with the students and talking about social justice with them. And what is it that we want to see change in our world to make our world better? And so students had these big, grand ideas, as a lot of gifted students do. And then they started bringing them into, well, what could we control? What could we look at? And so the students specifically wanted to look at their playground. Their playground was falling apart. They had friends in other schools that didn't have playgrounds that were falling apart, and they wanted to know how they could fix that and bring a proposal to their teacher or to their principal. And she had them do this work in their heritage languages. They were doing a lot of visual learning as well, and presented that to the principal, and they wound up making changes. And this was an elementary school. So those things, right? That's that interest-based, true, authentic problem. And that's the other culturally responsive piece. The reflective of culture, honoring collectivist instructional practices, which Michelle, I think, is going to go into in just a little bit. I think we may have taken that piece out. If we did, we'll send it to you. Talent development, and then honoring the heritage language. And then, of course, mentorships and being with other students that look like them and sound like them, that they have that affinity group. Okay, Michelle's going to take us through a couple of activities that we have done, that we've designed intentionally to help understand our students and create a safe space for them.
All right, so our first activity, is that the next slide? Yeah, is actually we want to share with you the cultural tree activity that we have done with our students. And this is basically what Robin had talked about earlier, about the surface culture and the deep roots, and middle culture, talking about that too. So we're basically talking about kids actually have a visual portrayal of their culture. And so you can see, as Max says, you know, we celebrate Christmas and Hanukkah and aren't very religious. And when you get down, that's a surface, right? What you can see. We currently live in an urban community, but my parents grew up in rural and suburban. So probably things they talk about. And then you get into the shallow culture. Shallow culture, he says, eye contact's important in our family. And the shallow culture, of course, be the tree part right there, where you've got the upper part with the leaves as more of the surface. More of the shallow is we don't emphasize respect much, and often talk the same regardless of age. And then we get in the deep roots of this cultural tree for Max. My family has conflicting views on spirituality, but we are okay with that. And then in my school, cultural teaching should be self-guided.
And we have, as Michelle did, we have done this. This is an artifact from a group of, this was a student, and we've worked with adults with this. And again, thinking about how do you get to know, if you think even some of those beginning of year activities, how do you get to know the students? And this is regardless of the cultures in your classroom, can be done.
All right, and then another visual presentation of culture. We've also done identity portraits. All right, so this one is one that basically we have used a book, Julius Lester's Let's Talk About Race, which actually within the book is really actually quite beautiful because it talks about how we are each parts of a self, and that all of our parts, one of our parts is actually a person's identity. And then it goes on to conclude that really we're all the same. If you took your skin, all your skin off and all your skin color, it was just down to your bones, we'd all be the same. And so it's just really a beautiful story and talks about hopes and dreams too. Anyway, so with this, we actually have a very simple process. We give students a piece of paper, a white piece of paper. We also give them some multicultural crayons. So if they choose, they can depict their skin color, which most of the time they do. And then we ask for them to draw basically a head and shoulders, and then cut it in half. And then draw yourself on one side, as you can see the students did. And on the other side, talk about what makes you your identity, what makes you yourself. And, of course, they can leave away from that if they choose and do something different, which we'll show you in the next slide. But as you can see for the first portrait, the student has basically noted their skin color, right? You can see that. And then they also described a few things about themselves, such as they're a swimmer, they're multicultural, and they're not very self-confident. And that was pretty big for him to put that on there for them, because that really portrays a vulnerability. So we see some of those things that our students do when they create these identity portraits. And then on the second portrait, the student talks about how many siblings they have and how they love animals. And then she's the littlest in my family. So let's go to the next slide, Robin. And so on this slide, you can see, once again, we've got our multicultural colors being used with this student. And this student noted the first portrait that they like video games, drawings, but they do not like their brother. You can see that on the shoulders. They do not like their brother because the brother's always bothering them. So we always sort of chuckle about that. And this last portrait, you can see that the student deviated just a little bit from our instructions. She actually gave a portrait of herself, which is actually really well done. And then she sort of did around almost like a circle map, except her head is a circle. And so she talks about her identity. And she also just talks about, I speak German. I have a lot of friends. I like to make jewelry. So these are just really great ways for students to capture their identities in a visual format, and then also great ways to share with their peers.
So another activity that I have seen done is with using some different picture books, specifically with depth and complexity. And I want to give a shout out to Marcy because of the work that she has done for our multilingual learners with using depth and complexity has really elevated the rigor of this work and has brought awareness to it. So thank you for creating something that people can use as a resource. Just grateful for you. So this work is from a few years ago. This was in a gifted and talented itinerants classroom. And what she was doing is she was beginning to use depth and complexity. And you can see right now she's in the first picture on the left, where you see the ants. She has asked them, they could pick their own depth and complexity icon because that's where they were at this point in their understanding of the icons. And so you'll see some talk about the ethical implications of immigrants, and you'll see the wide range. This was, she's a gifted and talented teacher working with students that were across the continuum when it comes to their neurodiversity. And so you'll see students are accessing it at the level that they're at. And these are multilingual learners. You'll also see over to the right, she was working, and I put the student's name, Noelle, on here in the middle, and they were using just the depth and complexity and thinking maps, the bubble map right here, to talk about details about them. So sort of another additional piece to that identity that we did just a couple of minutes ago. Another way in which we've seen this, and it's a best practice within our multilingual learners, gifted education, is really taking what's important or a social justice piece and having the students dive into that. And in this particular place, this was a 5th grade general education teacher, and she had a combination of multilingual learners from all around the globe in her classroom. And she started in this classroom was talking about about revolution. What does it mean to have a revolution? What is a revolution? And so she is, for our gift, if we think about our multilingual learners and the scaffolding, or even our 2E learners, the scaffolding that needs to take place for us, you'll see that she's broken it down into the tasks. And you'll see, at the very end where she's taking them through, there's going to be a museum exhibit. Now, what I know, and she didn't put on here, is that museum exhibit could look like anything. And students, when I saw this at the end, and I'm so sad I didn't take pictures, they had Eritrean language. They were using their Spanish language. Like they got to be themselves and talk about revolutions within their own country, but also one was just a whole description of why you would have a revolution. So it could be a little controversial, so it depends on your school district. But again, just that going back to that, here's something that's interesting, it's social justice related, and it pertains to my culture. The other piece, she had this, and I don't have this on here, but she had this translated into Spanish as well as a couple of different African languages so the students could capture it. And then I'm sure you have heard of this term, mirror books, window books, and then there's prism books. And it's really using that as a metaphor to describe how the books can impact readers within the context of working with diverse representation and working in a diverse population. So as you know, the mirror book reflects the learner's experience and how they identify. The window gives them a window, like they're looking through a window into somebody else's culture that's different from their own and offers them a different perspective. And then the prism is the illumination of multiple facets of one's identity and experience. So it acknowledges the complexity of characters and their intersectional identities. Now, one of the sites that Michelle and I like to use is commonsensemedia.org. And so you can specifically look when you're thinking, how do I even find a book that is going to represent one of my students from Rwanda and one of my students who comes from Guatemala? How do I do that? So Common Sense Media you could do that by Googling, first of all, but Common Sense Media we use because it gives us a quick sort of biography, or not biography, what's the word I'm looking for? It's like a little anthology that it'll give us, and it gives ratings and how appropriate it is so that you have a little insight, a preview before they come, before you choose that book.
All right, let's move into how we leverage families for our inclusive classrooms. We know that many of our Latinx families may not come into the classrooms because they might have several different jobs they're going to. And in that culture, it's actually assumed by the families that the school is doing what the school needs to be doing, right? So there's really no need for them to come into the classrooms. So we really want to invite these families into our classrooms and welcome them and make them feel part of the community of the classroom and the community of other families. So here are a couple of ways, some authentic ways that you can do that. Number one is simply just by honoring diversity in the classroom and honoring these our families' languages and their cultures and the way they communicate. The other is by communication, right? Make sure that you are sending out communication to your families according to their cultural needs and their language needs. I mean, that's a simple thing to do as well. Also, just having home visits. I know in one of the schools that I worked in, that was the first thing we did. At the beginning of the year, we would go into the homes and visit with families. And it wasn't a situation where we weren't trying to ask them a lot of questions. We were just really there to listen and to see what their hopes and dreams are for their kids. And then usually we brought like a little gift, like maybe it's a deck of cards that we might learn and play a game with them while we're there home visiting in the home. The other thing is to have, I know a couple of things that we do, at least I've done in my district, and Robin can chime in for her for what she's done. Bilingual family liaison is something that I put into at the district level about 5 years ago. And that was because I really wanted to have our Latino families really get some more types of workshops and information that they might not be receiving in their schools about gifted children. And so I do have a bilingual family liaison who actually develops our Latinx family events, which then leads into what we call them. We call the Latinx family events, or any family events, family learning opportunity workshops, which we titled as Flow. So we'll show you a little bit of that, but that's really some pictures of that in a minute. But that's really just offering our families a sense of community outside of school, but just also a culture community of also families who have gifted students. So yeah, we really like Flow. Robin, do you want to say anything about?
You know, one of the things that was really special when I was working in Denver public schools, and I was at that time, I was supporting the entire school district, like Michelle's role now in Boulder. And one of the things that was incredibly valuable was getting our families' feedback on our communication out to them. Everything from how our website was designed. So we actually held family engagement, like focus groups with our Latinx families, with our African American families to say, how are you receiving this? And with our white families as well. But it was really important for us to make sure we were reaching out to our students and families who had been historically marginalized and not welcomed in education to get their eyes. And so they gave feedback like, hey, this is too much language. You've made this too teacher. You've made this too education focused. Or, hey, this isn't enough. Here's where we need more information. Could you put resources here? And when we say this, when it translates on our site, like if they go to translate it, this word isn't correct, right? And just little things like that. And so we created, and it's using this liberatory design for learning. We started to create agency of with our families that they had a role in creating parts for our school district. Okay? And so that went a long way with them as well. And then, of course, always, whether you have a lot of money, you don't have any money in your district, when possible, we would have different interpreters and translators come. And when we hosted our Latinx family events, what we did specifically we would do monolingual Spanish speaking events. And then we would have interpretation in English for our families who still wanted to come. We had dinner for them. We had games. We had something we would do with our parents while the children were doing something else. And those families that came to listen who speak English as their heritage language were able to participate as well. And that was the feedback we got from that was like, thank you for doing that. This was very interesting and a good experience for us to hear something being spoken in Spanish and then having to interpret and translate. So just again, building moments where you can create ties and connection and build empathy.
No, Robin, may I interrupt? There is a question from someone in the audience, and they want you to define the Latinx term. How are you defining Latinx?
Yeah, so we are talking about, and we didn't put it in this one, we usually do. We are talking about those communities within Latin America who speak Spanish, and sometimes it's not always Spanish, right? Because we have Latinx in the Dominican Republic. They speak Spanish, but they may be speaking French as well. Depending on who settled there, like the Dutch. So we're looking at Central and South America, and specifically that group in some of our Caribbean islands. And the reason we use the X in there is because we wanted to make it non-gender specific. So that is why we had used that X to support that. And now, since using that, because that was a very popular term and a movement that was happening in Denver by a lot of our advocates, our Hispanic advocates and our Latinx advocates, now we're hearing and trying to be sensitive to the fact that some of our Spanish speaking families are like, hey, we don't like that term. So, so we're working through that. Like, tell me why. And some of it is because they feel like maybe it's too broad for them. Michelle, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, in our school district too, we have Latinx, but we also have we actually have Latin A
A.
slash O
Uh-huh.
slash X
Uh-huh.
slash E, I think, to cover all those because not everyone agrees, even within the Hispanic community, and doesn't agree with all those terms or even Hispanic. So, but we did use it for more of a gender neutral term. we're now moving, as you know, as education moves, terms move, things change. We are now moving into talking more about multilingual learners, multilingual gifted learners, in our future presentations and some of the ones we've just done recently.
It's a great question. Thank you, Marcy. Always interrupt us. I'm not able to see the chat right now just because of my view. So definitely interrupt us. Thank you.
All right, so we're just sharing this with you. We have links to these that we can put into the chat, which I think Robin can do if you're interested. If we have that ability, I don't know if we do or not. We may not.
I'm going to get out and you guys will see the magic behind. No, there's no magic. Don't pay attention to person
So
behind the curtain.
these are interview templates that we've created when we are trying to get more information about our families. As you well know, when kids come to school, any kids, right? We only see basically what we see, the surface level, if you want to say that. But really, in a lot of cases, well, most cases, our children are complex. And in order to help support their needs, we really need to know more about them sometimes. And so these are some student interview questions that we have come up with together, just asking the student about their needs and their hopes and dreams, and also family questionnaire we have in there too as well that talks about hopes and dreams for families. What is your best hope for your child at school? What is your best hope for relationships at your school? So some broader questions that really can help us guide us as we're working with families and students. And then also we have that, and of course it's in Spanish as well.
So we shared those with you. You should have access. If for some reason a link doesn't work, please let us know and we'll make sure we get that cleared up.
Thank you for that.
Oh, okay. So we're back to Flow again, our family learning opportunity workshops. I want to show you a couple of just some pictures of this. We also have all these events, like Robin mentioned, at her previous school district. We have all these events are in Spanish. We do offer English interpretation if you need that. And then we also like to connect with our community partners. So we reach out to anyone. We're in Boulder, Colorado. So we reach out to also like University of Colorado, which is very close to where the Ed Center is here where I work. And so we connect a lot with them with their museums, their science museum, their art museum, and they have a lot of activities that they provide for the students. We come in, we bring our students in and their families, and then we also provide food. That's always a big win. And then we just have a community sharing situation, and it just really turns out really well. We've connected with some other smaller groups, such as like the Thorn Nature Group. And then also we've gotten a few grants from Impact on Education. So we were able to provide these types of services outside of our budget.
I think that's huge, is the grant piece, because especially if we're in rural areas or we are in a highly impacted school, it's really it's budgets are tight and we never know what's going to happen with our school budget. We think we know, and then other things come along that we can't control. So grants are fantastic if you're able to get those.
All right, and then we just have a list of resources here. Just some links if you actually have the slide deck. And I don't know, Marcy, if they'll have that or not, but these are also, you could just look these up on Google. But social justice standards, a link to that. And then Windows and Marrows, like we talked about earlier. Rising Voices Library is, Rama, can you explain that one, the Rising Voices Library for me?
Yeah, actually, I wonder if it'll let me go there and I can show you.
Oh, that would be cool.
Yeah. So this particular section, this is on Scholastic. So it's Scholastic's website. Can you guys see that right now?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. And so what I love about this is that it has resources for teachers as well. And when we talk about creating that culturally inclusive and responsive environment and thinking about culturally responsive education, you see that positive representation and gives tools. So it's an actual framework. So when they start looking at books, it has these things that it looks at. So family, culture, and community, and it makes the students that in this particular instruction to start thinking, how do I help others around me? There are characters within the stories that look like them, heroes and role models. the biggest piece that I love about this is that there's really there with any good children's book, right, or any book that we read, it's that there's strong, resilient problem solvers as the main characters, and so it's really good also about helping students think beyond their here and now, like what's their impact on the future.
Thank you. I knew you could do more justice with that than I could have.
It's
Um,
truly a great resource, you guys, and we'll give you the links as well to this.
and so then we had the books with Latino characters in there. That's also the Common Sense Media. And then Helping Kids Rise, so a collection of diverse books. And then Creating Culturally Responsive Lessons. Here, yeah, share that. That's perfect.
So
And that's
wanted
Dr.
to
Yumi's resource. Yep, go
Yep,
ahead,
and I
Robin.
just wanted to make sure that you all had what he has as like the lesson cycle. It's a little blurry, but it's the lesson cycle, and then what do we want at the very end so that you're able to backwards plan. And then here are those questions that I was showing you earlier that you'll also have access to on the QR code or with links.
Okay, and then we have our checklist for culturally responsive best practices. Um, and so this is a checklist that we have based upon our framework, talking about assessment, programming, services, and family engagement. And so these are just questions that you can ask yourself and even use it to evaluate your systems to see if you are covering these types of culture responsive best practices for gifted learners.
Because the idea too with this is instruction is one piece of this work. However, what we're aiming to do is build an entire system that is culturally responsive and culturally informative, informed, and inclusive, not culturally assaultive, which is what we have now in many places.
And then last thing we put on here, which is of utmost importance, the Bill of Rights for gifted students of color, who actually was developed by high list of gifted professionals and experts in the field. And so this is just a really great document. So I would suggest that you definitely take a look at this. And then we also have, oh, Robin, go back to
Yep.
that. Sorry.
Okay, no, go for it.
We also have this QR code that we put in here, which will actually send you some resources. So you can just scan that and you have access to a lot of things.
Yeah, and we're happy to provide this slide deck, Marcy, to you and to our SIG. So when we're done, we'll send this on to you. So if anybody on here wants to access it, they are more than welcome to, and to
Thank
use
you.
any ideas.
Thank you.
So this is one of my favorite statements by James Baldwin. Before we get to his statement, there was another really influential person, Dr. Martin Jenkins, in gifted education. And he said, it's our opportunity and it's our obligation to identify gifted students of color. It's our opportunity and our obligation to see students wholly and completely and teach them as so with their culture. It is our opportunity and obligation, and it's a matter for Michelle and I, it's a matter of civil rights for our Latinx learners, for our multilingual learners to receive their free and appropriate education. So, a lot of this work, and especially right now in education, although I'm not sure of any other time where it's been smooth sailing in education, this at times feels like we can't change everything. There's so many things against us. And I keep going back to this quote, and it is what keeps inspiring me that not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced. And I'm so grateful that you are here today because you're fighting boots on the ground to make sure that our students have that appropriate environment, and you are our change makers. Here's some of our references. Again, you'll get this. And then if you want to email us, and my battery apparently is running low, so this was good timing. If you want, I don't know if that came across the screen or not.
It did.
It did, fantastic. But if you would like to email us, this is our email, and we're happy to connect and just talk. Marcy and I were talking earlier. This is her passion. This is our passion. So anything you need, please reach out. And I'm going to stop sharing because I know we may have a little bit of time. This is the first time Michelle and I have ever ended early.
That
So
is so true.
it's so,
So true.
so thank you.
Wow, ladies, what a wealth of information. I would like to invite, there were a couple of comments in the chat, and I'll address those in just a moment, but I'd like to invite anyone who has a question, since we have a minute or two left, to post it in the chat. I'll read it and let you ladies, either one of you, address that question. So are there questions that can be addressed?
Or I would even say, Marcy, are there good things that you guys are doing that you're doing this, but then maybe you're doing more than, and something different that you're finding is working? We'd love to hear that too.
Certainly. While we're waiting, I'll just say there was a comment thanking you for referencing Common Sense Media,
Oh,
that it served the public, parents and teachers well.
yeah.
And I'll just mention, I know there was an earlier question about identification,
Mhm.
and that is such a lengthy topic that I think what I will do is include that as the topic for our next webinar in the series. We'll talk about ways to identify how to overcome barriers in identification. I think that's a good question, but I don't think we've got enough time to adequately address all of the
Oh my
pieces.
gosh. However,
But
I will
thank you.
say one of those things that in the resources, you'll have that it's a checklist, which we don't want it to be a checklist, but we were trying to make it digestible. It's as you're reviewing your program, and there is a section on assessment that helps frame your thinking when you're looking at your assessments that you might find helpful.
Mhm.
And always happy to be a resource and share how we have increased identification of bilingual learners in our own spheres too.
Super. Eva, I didn't realize this. I know Eva. She says, I'm implementing a dual GT program in my district for elementary GT, and this is a great framework for her to use. She said, can you please share your book titles again?
Yes. In fact,
So maybe that first slide or that second slide that
yeah,
had that information on it would be great.
let me go back to that. This last slide has it.
Oh, good.
So the supporting gifted elves,
There we go.
that's the one that we are going to do our second edition on and change it to multilingual learners, and then leading culturally responsive gifted programs. And these different frameworks were built out of real world. This is what we did and how we got here. And we're not perfect, but we saw a real change that was positive, and we wanted to share it with others.
And the first book actually has a whole chapter on identification.
It sure does. Yeah, like its whole section on family engagement. We also have some case studies in there that you can use. We have someone who has created a book, what am I talking? Book study that if we could get our hands on too, if you're interested in that.
Super. Thank you so much.
Mm.
Any other questions? It was a thank you. And a thank you for sharing your slide decks. That's extremely generous of you ladies.
Yeah.
I am going to put my email in the chat, because if you are a part of the NABE GT bilingual SIG, I will send this to you. But I know that there are some folks that are not a member, because we invited some additional people to come.
Yeah.
So if for some reason you are not a member of the National Association for Bilingual Education, Gifted and Talented Bilingual Education Special Interest Group, please send me an email and I will share that with you.
Thank you, Marcy, so much for inviting us today.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, ladies, for coming. It is so nice to have experts in the room. So we appreciate your time and your kindness in sharing your expertise.
Thank you. And yeah, Marcy, as soon as we're done, I will get that sent over to you. That way you can share that out. Okay.
Bless you. I appreciate that. Well, Thank you again today for attending. I really appreciate your time. Our ladies, for Robin and Michelle, sharing your time and expertise with us, and those of you in the audience who have taken time out of your day to be able to listen and learn. Again, you shared a wealth of information. I'm so excited. I took a ton of notes, and I'm sure the others did as well. So thank you again, all of you, for your attendance today.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great
Thank you.
night.